And what's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning back into the channel. Today I'm Zach Davis, and today we're going to continue our timing indicator series. I've been going through some of the books of the New Testament. We've done 1 Corinthians, we've done some work in Romans, we've done some work in Acts, so make sure you go back and check those videos out. Like and subscribe to the channel down below. Thanks to everyone for the support. I've had many people reach out to me and just support for the channel, and thanks for what we're doing here. So hopefully we'll see you all soon at the conference that's coming up next week. Look forward to meeting many of you. Don't forget to like and subscribe down below. I would also like to add that there have been some folks who've requested that I create a Patreon account just so they could support. If that's something that you want to do, then please feel more than free to do that. It's patreon.com/ZachDavis, and you can find a way to support in that tab there. So let's get straight to it. Today we're going to look at the book of James and timing indicators in James. One thing that needs to be set out right at the very beginning is who James' audience is. James is writing to the 12 tribes who are scattered abroad. So you have dispersion that's all over this known empire. I really think the book of Hosea would be good for you to go back, take a look at. Hosea talks about how God divorced Israel, the 10 northern tribes, and how he stayed in covenant with Judah in the south. But here's something that's unique. Whenever we think about people coming back into the land, and you hear a lot of people today talk about 1948 in Israel, and they'll talk about the Jews coming back into the land. Well, the way I view it, and go back and look at my first fruits and the 144,000, the restoration of Israel video that I posted not too long ago. The way I view it is, the way they were coming back into the land or into the presence of God was come to be in Christ. So Paul changed it from in the land to in Christ. And if you look at Paul's resurrection, the reason he was on trial was mainly for that. He wasn't denying resurrection, but that resurrection was in Christ, which was in opposition to being in the land. So go back and take some notes on that. I think that's important to understand. James writing to a dispersed group of Jews in the known world who know Christ. So just lay that as a precursor. And also you could note in James chapter 1 in verse 18 that he calls them the first fruits. The same thing happens to the 144,000. In Revelation 7 and Revelation 14, they are called the first fruits. Now, since they're the first fruits, we need to make a couple of notes on first fruits. Number one, they weren't physically dead. They were spiritually dead, and now, since they were the first fruits, had been brought back into the presence of God. So you can't make the first fruits something that's a physical resurrection. That has to be something of the nature of a spiritual resurrection. So James 1:18 and James 1 are really where you need to start for time indicators on the book of James. But I've got a couple others that I want to make sure we take note of. James chapter 2 and verse 12 reads this way in the New King James Version. So speak and so do as those who will be judged by the law of liberty. And you say, okay, well, it's not a big deal. They will be judged. Well, we're going to get back into some of our mellow discussion that we've had. Mellow is often a Greek word that is really untranslated. And I believe that it's untranslated because it doesn't fit the bias of the interpreters. Young's literal translation translates James 2:12, so speak ye and so do, as about by the law of liberty to be judged. So essentially he's saying about to be judged. Let me read you some comments on mellow. First, I'll read you some from Gary DeMar. He states this on his website. Sometimes it's translated as about to, while other times it is untranslated. Some claim that mellow can mean certainty with no reference to timing. I'm not sure how translators can be certain about that. They will say the context tells us, but maybe it's a person's eschatological position that influences the way that mellow is translated. Close quote. And I would agree with DeMar on that. Another thing that you'll see that's common for mellow is for people who maybe earlier, whether it was 90s or early 2000s, were starting to get on board with some of the things for mellow to use to defend partial preterism, and then you'll see them completely backtrack and they'll step away from it. And one example of that would be Ken Gentry, who softened on mellow. But let me read you what he wrote in Before Jerusalem Fell. And he's not defending it from James, but he is discussing mellow from the book of Revelation. He says, nevertheless, when used with the aorist infinitive, as in Revelation 1:19, the word's preponderant usage to preferred meaning is, be on the point of, be about to. The same is true when the word is used with the present infinitive, as in Revelation 3:10. The basic meaning in both Thayer and Abbott Smith is to be about to. Close quote. So you can see how mellow is used and defended by some very popular folks to create imminence. And I would say the same thing for James's judgment and what was about to be. James chapter 5 and verse 1, we read this. And really, James chapter 5 is extremely important. I would encourage you to cross-reference the Sermon on the Mount, specifically Matthew 5 and 6, and especially 6, with James chapter 5. What Jesus predicted would happen, it came true here in what they were calling and known as the last days. Notice Jesus was speaking to a Jewish audience on the Mount. I'm not saying that it doesn't have application in other ways to the church or to the Gentiles. Not at all what I'm saying. There are dispensationalists who teach that, but I'm not saying that. There is an immediate context, however, that James picks up on that he continues with his Jewish audience. He says, "Come now, you rich, weep and howl for your miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten." Remember, Jesus said, "Lay up your treasures in heaven where moth rusts don't destroy." Verse 3, "Your gold and silver are corroded, and their corrosion will be a witness against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have heaped up treasure in the last days." And if you're a subscriber to this channel, or if you've spent any time listening to any of my teaching, you understand that I believe the last days speak not of the last days of the planet, but the last days of the old covenant economy, the last days of that Jewish age and Jewish system, which fits perfectly with James writing to a Jewish audience, speaking of a judgment that would about to come. All right, James 5 verse 7 says, "Therefore be patient, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, waiting patiently for it until it receives the early and latter rain." And I think that's got some first fruits reference. There would be early on the front side of the dry season, early rain. On the back side, you'd have a latter rain. I'll leave that there. Verse 8, "You also be patient." Notice the audience relevance that he's speaking to them. It has some merit. It's got to mean something to the first people it was written to. "You also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand." So you've got to make the context and the understanding. We bring everything into it. And if you do that, I really am not convinced you can make "at hand" mean 2,000 years. So study it. Think about it in the whole context of biblical timing and eschatology. The Old Testament predicted things far off. Jesus said that it would happen in that generation. And the further you go in the New Testament, the closer things get. The last thing I'll point out in this video on James is James chapter 5 and verse 9, which reads this way, "Do not grumble against one another, brethren, lest you be condemned. Behold, the judge is standing at the door." Standing at the door, same concept as Revelation chapter 3. So judgment and the door. But this is picked up, I think, from Matthew chapter 24. And when I saw this, I thought this was extremely powerful. Matthew 24:33, Jesus said, "So you also, when you see all these things," okay, what things? Well, the great tribulation, abomination of desolation, all the signs that he had predicted. When you see all of these things, know that it is near at the doors. Therefore, if James had said that the judge was standing at the door, Matthew 24:33 and 34 said it would happen in that generation, and once he was at the door, all of those things had happened. Therefore, James clearly tells us a timing indicator, these things had happened, that this event was close to that generation. I think that speaks volumes, and I hope that's helpful to you to think about. I pointed that out in my video with Travis when we did Matthew chapter 24 in one of our last videos. Thanks for watching the channel today, guys. Like and subscribe down below. God bless you, and we'll see you soon.